Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Tonight, we travel far back, to the very beginning of what we call civilization, to the land of Sumer, where the first words were written, and where, they say, the gods once walked among men. But hidden beneath the sands of Mesopotamia lie records that were never meant to be found, tablets so old they speak of a time before history itself, a time when humanity was made, not born, and when the knowledge of the stars was carved into our very blood. What if the Sumerians didn't just record our past? What if they remembered something the rest of us forgot? So get comfortable, and let the night carry you back through the dust of forgotten ages. Because what you're about to hear may change everything we thought we knew about where we came from and who we really are. Before we begin, if you enjoy journeys into the ancient and the unknown, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join me as we awaken the whispers of the world's first civilization. Beneath the quiet sands of southern Mesopotamia, where the rivers Tigris and Euphrates once whispered to each other like ancient storytellers, lies a silence older than memory itself. The land is still, but if you listen closely, you can almost hear the murmur of something beneath it, the faint hum of forgotten cities, the echo of prayers carved into clay thousands of years ago. The Sumerians called this place Ki-en-Gir, the land of the noble lords. It was here, according to the oldest records ever found, that humanity first learned to write, to build, to measure the stars, and perhaps to remember who we truly are. But some say the oldest of their tablets tell a different story, one that never made it into the history books, a story about a time before time, about beings who descended not from the earth, but from the heavens. About knowledge so vast that even the gods feared it might outlive them. When archaeologists first uncovered the ruins of Uruk, Eridu, and Lagash, they expected to find primitive settlements, but what they found instead defied belief. Massive ziggurats aligned with the stars, perfectly cut stone foundations older than the cities built atop them, and tablets written in cuneiform that seemed to speak of a civilization already ancient when Sumer itself began. The tablets spoke softly, but their words were precise, of kings who ruled for tens of thousands of years, of the black-headed people shaped by divine hands, of the Anunnaki, beings of light and fire, who came from beyond to teach humankind. Most scholars called them myths, but some researchers, quiet, careful voices, buried in old libraries and forgotten archives, began to see a pattern. One particular discovery, unearthed near the ancient city of Nippur, changed everything. Hidden deep within a collapsed temple, sealed behind layers of ash and clay, archaeologists found a collection of tablets unlike any seen before. The writing was familiar yet strange. Cuneiform, yes, but older, sharper, and carved with almost mathematical precision. These became known as the Nipur Codex. When translated, the tablets didn't recount kings or harvests or laws. They spoke instead of the beginning, a time before rivers, before cities, before even the sky and earth were separated. They described the creation of humankind not as an accident, but as an act of design, a collaboration between beings of the heavens and those of the earth. It was here that the first unsettling phrase appeared, "The blood of the gods mixed with the clay of men." To most, it sounded like myth, but among the translators, a quiet unease grew. The text spoke of experiments, of the shaping of flesh, of vessels that could bear the divine image. It told of failures, creatures that could not speak, that forgot, that wandered, and then of success, the first of mankind, shaped to serve, yet capable of creation. These records were older than any known Sumerian text, possibly pre-Sumerian, written by an unknown hand. The style suggested a language that predated Sumerian itself. And there was more. In one fragment, almost erased by time, the text read, "When the watchers saw the first of man awaken, they said, 'He will remember.' So they hid the knowledge beneath the rivers, beneath the stones, until the age of stars returned. No one knew what the age of stars meant. But a chilling realization followed. The location described seemed to match a buried structure beneath the ruins of Eridu, the oldest known city on Earth. When excavations began there in the late 20th century, strange things happened. Instruments malfunctioned. Compasses spun aimlessly. Workers reported dreams, the same dream, night after night, of standing in a vast hall of black stone, hearing a deep rhythmic pulse like the beating of the Earth's heart. Then, one morning, an archaeologist uncovered something that should not have existed, a sealed chamber, perfectly preserved. Inside were tablets of a material harder than clay, dark, metallic, and faintly magnetic. The inscriptions glowed under certain light, though no pigment or paint was found. No one could explain them. What they said has never been officially released. But a partial translation, leaked by one of the team members before vanishing from the record entirely, contained a phrase that continues to haunt historians and dreamers alike. "We left before the flood. We will return when the stars align." It was written in the same style as the Nipur Codex, and dated to nearly 12,000 years before the rise of Sumer. Some called it nonsense. Others whispered that these might be records from the civilization before Sumer, a civilization erased by the flood myths, echoed in every ancient culture. And yet, as the tablets were studied, a strange consistency emerged. The knowledge they contained, astronomical alignments, lunar cycles, even mathematical constants, was far beyond what early humans were believed to know. Everywhere in the ruins of Sumer, symbols repeated. Stars descending toward mountains, winged figures holding tools that looked like modern instruments, and trees with roots that spread into the heavens. Each symbol seemed to say the same thing. We were taught, then we forgot. In the quiet of the desert night, with the wind whispering across the ruins, you can almost feel it, the weight of something vast and hidden, pressing gently against the edge of what we call history. Perhaps the Sumerians weren't the first civilization at all. Perhaps they were merely the first to remember. The desert does not hurry. It swallows centuries, one grain of sand at a time, smoothing the edges of all that once stood proud. When the archaeologists returned to Aridu, they found that the dunes had already begun reclaiming their work, a whisper of dust over the tents, the low hum of wind through broken stones. Beneath those sands, in the dark belly of the earth, lay the chamber that had changed everything. It was discovered almost by accident, a hollow sound beneath a fallen block, a tremor that hinted at emptiness below. The entrance was narrow, cut into basalt, descending in a spiral that felt more engineered than carved. The air inside was dry, ancient, and heavy with the scent of minerals and something faintly metallic. At the lowest point stood a door of polished stone unlike any found in Sumer. There were no hinges, no visible seams, only smarvshant slab, marked with faint geometric carvings that seemed to pulse when light touched them. It took weeks before the team managed to move it. When they did, the air that escaped was cold, impossibly cold for the desert. and carried with it a strange, low hum, like distant thunder. Inside, the walls were black and smooth, reflecting faint glimmers of the team's flashlights. And there, in the center, sat the tablets, stacked in neat rows upon a raised platform. Not clay, not stone, something else. A metal that seemed alive, that resonated faintly when touched. The writing shimmered, cuneiform, yes, but embedded as if melted into the surface. Each mark was razor-sharp, glowing briefly as the light passed over it, fading again into darkness. The tablets were taken carefully, catalogued, and sent to a secure facility in Baghdad. Only 5 people were given clearance to study them. Within months, 2 of them had left the project, citing illness and exhaustion. One simply disappeared. The remaining scholars worked quietly, translating piece by piece, until they reached what appeared to be the record of descent. It spoke of those who came from above, but not as gods, rather as travelers. It described vessels descending upon waves of fire and wind, landing where the waters met the plain. It mentioned coordinates, patterns that, when plotted, aligned perfectly with the ancient riverbeds of Mesopotamia. And then came the unsettling section. They took of the earth and of their own essence. They shaped the clay and gave it breath. Thus were made the keepers of memory. The translators debated endlessly. Some argued it was symbolic, a mythic retelling of evolution. Others whispered of genetic creation, long before humanity could even dream of such concepts. But deeper still, the text spoke of a record, a kind of living archive stored not in stone or metal, but within the human mind itself. We wrote within them the remembrance so that when the stars are right, the song will awaken once more. The phrase repeated several times, like a refrain. No one could agree on its meaning. Then came the warnings. If they remember too soon, the balance will fail. The sky will tremble, and the rivers will rise again. Only when the twin lights meet above the plain shall they awaken fully. The scholars puzzled over this for months, until one researcher noticed something curious. The twin lights corresponded exactly to a rare astronomical event, the alignment of Venus and Sirius over Mesopotamia, an event predicted to occur again in the 21st century. That researcher was Dr. Hassan al-Badr, a quiet man known for his precision and skepticism. He had no patience for myths. But after weeks studying the inscriptions, he began to change. He stopped sleeping, he spoke less, and he kept a small notebook, filling it with strange diagrams, spirals, stars, and human silhouettes. Then, one morning, he was gone. His tent was empty, his notes scattered, the desert wind fluttering through them like wings. All that remained was a short passage written in the margin of his translation. They are not gone. They are waiting. After that, the site was sealed. Officially, the discovery was labeled a collapsed chamber of ritual artifacts. The metallic tablets vanished into government storage, and the story faded into rumor. But rumors have a way of surviving, especially when they whisper to the human need to remember. Years later, fragments of Dr. Hassan's notes resurfaced in academic circles. They described frequencies hidden in Sumerian symbols, patterns that, when converted into sound, produced tones eerily similar to the Earth's natural resonance. He believed the tablets were not meant to be read, but heard. And when one of his students tested this theory, feeding the cuneiform patterns into an audio converter, something strange happened. A low hum filled the room. The lights flickered, and beneath the sound, faint, rhythmic, and impossible, was a voice. Not speech exactly, but a vibration that seemed to pulse in waves of meaning. The translator swore he felt words rather than heard them, words he couldn't fully recall, except for one phrase that echoed long after the recording ended. The memory of man is the archive of the gods. The recording was later corrupted. No copies survived. There is a strange quiet that follows discovery, a silence heavier than ignorance itself. When the voice from the tablet recording faded, those who had been present could not speak. One described it as hearing something both inside and outside his mind, as though the air itself had turned to memory. In the days that followed, whispers began to spread through the archaeological community. No one would claim them publicly, yet in hushed conversations, the same idea returned again and again, that the Sumerians had known something about frequency, about vibration and sound, that modern science had only just begun to rediscover. When researchers looked back at Sumerian temples, the great ziggurats that rose like stairways to the stars, they noticed something odd. Their design wasn't random. The dimensions of each level, the spacing of each step, even the bricks themselves seemed tuned to mathematical ratios related to harmonic resonance. It was as if the entire structure was a giant instrument. In the city of a fragment of a tablet described rituals where priests would chant for hours in low, rhythmic tones. The writing said, "The walls remember the song, and the stones hum with the breath of heaven." For centuries, scholars assumed it was poetic, but modern acoustic analysis of ziggurat foundations revealed a peculiar phenomenon. When sound waves of certain frequencies were played near them, the walls vibrated, not chaotically, but in harmony, amplifying the sound rather than absorbing it. It was as if the buildings were alive with echo. Some now believed that the Sumerians used sound not only for worship, but for communication, to awaken something, to connect. A few of Dr. Hassan's colleagues went further. They suggested that the voice from the tablets wasn't mystical at all. It was data, encoded through vibration, just as computers store information through electrical pulses. One night, late in the laboratory, a sound engineer named Lena stayed behind. She had been studying recordings of the hum from the chamber, layering them, slowing them, filtering them through spectral analysis. What she found chilled her. Hidden within the sound waves were patterns identical to human brain frequencies. Alpha, theta, and delta states, the rhythms of thought, sleep, and dream. It was as though the tablets were speaking in the language of the mind. When she adjusted the frequency slightly, the patterns formed shapes, spirals, figures, constellations. They matched ancient Sumerian star charts, and at the center of one pattern was the unmistakable outline of the Pleiades, a cluster of stars worshipped by countless early civilizations as the home of the gods. She printed the data and stared at it under the lab's dim light. The longer she looked, the stranger it felt, as if the stars were watching her back. She didn't tell anyone what she found. But the next morning, her computer was missing its hard drive. The lab logs were erased. The room's cameras showed only static from the night before. Lena left the project soon after. She never returned to archaeology. Yet, through her private notes, later discovered in a forgotten folder on an old research server, the idea persisted that the Sumerians had left behind not myths, but instructions, a way to access the memory they believed was planted within humankind itself. A later tablet fragment, less damaged than most, hinted at this same idea. The clay remembers its maker. The song of awakening lies within the blood. It seemed madness, yet traces of this belief survived for millennia. In Babylonian incantations, in Egyptian hymns, even in the whispered chants of old temple rituals across the world, the same tone, the same cadence, the same frequency of remembrance. Somewhere deep in the Sumerian psyche was a message. That memory was not something created by the brain, but something remembered through it. An echo of a time when man was more than man, when knowledge was inherited rather than learned. The Nipur Codex spoke of it plainly. When the song is heard by all, the sleepers shall awaken, and the first city shall rise again from beneath the dust. No one knew what that meant, but the more these words were studied, the more it seemed that the Sumerians had been waiting, not for the return of gods, but for the return of memory. One researcher, a linguist named Evelyn Rahim, noticed a linguistic pattern across the tablets. The word used for knowledge in the earliest texts, me, didn't just mean information. It meant divine measure, or essence. To hold the me was to carry the will of creation itself, to contain the blueprint of life, law, art, and even destiny. The tablets listed dozens of these me powers or frequencies that governed the world. One of them, the oldest and most sacred, was described as the me of remembrance, that which awakens the makers within the made. Dr. Evelyn began to suspect that the tablets from Eridu were not separate from the concept of me, but perhaps the source of it, a tangible key to reactivating something long dormant within human consciousness. She wrote in her journal, "Perhaps humanity's forgetting was not accidental. Perhaps it was mercy, because if the Sumerians had indeed carried within them the knowledge of their makers, the gods, or travelers, or something beyond comprehension, then remembering might not be enlightenment at all. It might be return. And perhaps the world was not ready to remember." For centuries, the story of a world-ending flood has floated through human memory like a shadow that refuses to fade. Every culture remembers it. The Sumerian deluge of Ziusudra, the Hebrew Noah, the Babylonian Utnapishtim, the Greek Deucalion. The names change, yet the pattern remains. A flood that erased nearly everything, and afterward, a remnant of knowledge carried forward by a single survivor. The Nipur Codex described the flood not as punishment, but as a cleansing of memory. When the clay remembered too much, the waters rose to quiet it. To the Sumerians, forgetting was protection. The flood was not merely water, it was a veil, a boundary drawn between what humanity had been and what it was allowed to be again. Archaeologists long believed the Sumerian flood was local, the result of a swollen river plain. But satellite mapping of the Persian Gulf basin revealed something strange. Traces of ancient riverbeds stretching far beneath the seabed, connecting sites once separated by desert and distance. Beneath those drowned channels, radar scans showed shapes that should not have been there. Perfect rectangles, geometric outlines, and foundations far older than the Sumerian cities above them. Among these shapes was one that mirrored the blueprints of a temple mentioned on a damaged tablet. The House of Remembrance, said to have been built before the first sunrise. The text claimed it held the final tablet, a record sealed against the flood, containing the measure of all me. For decades, it was treated as myth. Then, in the mid-2000s, a joint expedition between Iraqi and European researchers began sonar imaging of the Gulf's submerged shelf. In the silt, they found stone pillars standing in a ring. The same ratio, the same alignment described in the Codex. The temple was real. No one could dive that deep without specialized equipment. Yet when a remotely operated submersible descended, its camera caught a glimpse of carvings, angular lines almost identical to the metallic tablets from Eridu. Before the feed cut out, a brief shimmer of reflected light passed across the lens, forming what looked like a spiral etched into the floor, glowing faintly in the dark water. After that, the project was quietly abandoned. The official reason: unstable conditions, lack of funding. But within the archives of a European institute, an internal report circulated privately among scholars. It stated that the submersible's sensors had recorded a low-frequency hum emanating from the structure, identical to the resonance found in Sumerian ziggurats. The sound pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat, steady, deliberate, ancient. The researchers nicknamed it the pulse of Aridu. When acoustic data from the dive were cleaned of distortion, the waveform revealed harmonics that matched the frequencies Lena had uncovered years earlier. The tones connected to human brain activity. It was as if the sea itself were carrying a song too deep for human ears. One line from a broken tablet returned to mind. "When the waters remember the song, the sleepers shall awaken." No one in the team spoke publicly about it, but after the report leaked, strange correspondences began to surface from around the world. In Egypt, deep under the plateau near Saqqara, explorers reported identical vibrations recorded through stone passages. In Bolivia, at the site of Tiwanaku, seismic microphones picked up the same low pulse at dawn. And in southern Turkey, near Göbekli Tepe, a site thousands of years older than Sumer, archaeologists noticed carvings of spiral symbols nearly identical to those seen on the underwater footage. It was as though every ancient culture had once tuned itself to the same invisible rhythm, a planetary heartbeat that connected temples, mountains, and minds. Dr. Evelyn Rahim, now older and frail, wrote her final paper on this pattern. She called it the resonant network of memory. In it, she proposed a theory both poetic and unsettling. If humanity was created as a vessel of remembrance, then the earth itself is the instrument through which that remembrance resounds. Each sacred site is a note in a forgotten composition. She died before finishing the manuscript, but in her last entry she added a single line, barely legible: "They will awaken when the song completes." No one knew what they meant. Gods? Ancestors? Or perhaps simply us, the version of humankind that once remembered where it came from. As the years passed, the legend of the lost Sumerian records grew quieter again, drifting back into the haze between history and myth. Yet occasionally, on calm nights near the Gulf, divers claimed to hear a faint vibration through the hulls of their boats, a long, slow tone rising from the deep as if the earth were humming to itself. Some say it's nothing more than shifting currents. Others say it's the last echo of the House of Remembrance, calling to anyone still able to listen. And perhaps, if the Sumerians were right, the memory of the gods has never been gone at all, merely waiting, sleeping beneath the water, until the day humanity rediscovers the song it has carried all along. In the quiet laboratories of universities and research centers, the world rarely hears the first sound of revelation. It begins as a hum in the data, a pattern where none should exist. That was how the story of the Aridu frequency returned, not through excavation, but through mathematics. A young astrophysicist named Dr. Amara Selim had devoted her career to studying low-frequency radio noise from deep space. When she came across an old acoustic report labeled Eridu, field recordings, she was simply curious. She expected interference, perhaps sonar distortion from an underwater structure. Instead, what she found was rhythm. The pulse repeated every 43 seconds, too regular for geological activity, too slow for machinery. Yet hidden within each beat was a fractal pattern, a self-repeating geometry identical to brainwave data recorded in dream sleep. She slowed the recording, filtered out background rumble, and listened. At first, only a faint throb. Then, as if the sound remembered itself, layers emerged. Harmonics, overtones, whisper-like modulations that rose and fell in breath-like cadence. Amara stared at the spectrogram, transfixed. The shapes formed cuneiform curves, not words, but echoes of them, as if the sound itself were writing. For days she compared it against ancient Sumerian syllabaries. The correspondences were too close to ignore. The hum carried the same intervals found in the chanting of Sumerian hymns. It was, mathematically, speech slowed beyond hearing. She ran the frequencies through a model of human auditory response and shifted them upward into audible range. What emerged was haunting. A series of tones that seemed almost to breathe. Beneath them, faintly, a pattern of 3 repeating chords, one rising, one falling, one steady. When translated into notation, they matched the harmonic ratios carved into the ziggurat at Ur. The discovery should have ended there, a curious echo of history. But curiosity rarely stops where safety begins. One evening, Amara decided to broadcast the frequencies back into the air. She connected a low-band transmitter, set her equipment to the exact ratio inscribed on the temple plans, and let the tones play softly through the lab's speakers. The room trembled. A fine layer of dust fell from the ceiling tiles. On her monitor, every instrument began recording faint magnetic spikes, synchronized perfectly to the pulse. And for a single instant, every nearby compass turned east toward the ruins of ancient Aridu. She felt a pressure in her chest, not pain but resonance, as though her heartbeat had found an external rhythm. The lights dimmed, then steadied. When the tones faded, the silence that followed seemed impossibly deep. She wrote only one line in her log that night. The earth answered. In the weeks that followed, Amara's recordings were quietly removed from the Institute's servers. She received anonymous requests to ask spools for copies from departments she'd never heard of. Some offered funding. Others simply warned her to stop. But she couldn't. Something inside her, curiosity or perhaps remembrance, compelled her onward. She began to overlay the Aridu frequencies with global seismic data. The results stunned her. Every major ancient site, Giza, Stonehenge, Tiwanaku, Mohenjo-Daro, resonated at harmonics of the same bass tone. Different continents, different ages. One planetary melody. She published nothing. Instead, she left a series of encrypted files online, labeled only ME Archive. Each contained coordinates, equations, and fragments of the hum converted into musical notation. Those who decoded them noticed an oddity. When the notes were played on any instrument, the melody resolved perfectly into the ancient Sumerian scale known as A-Nimma-Anna, Song of the Skyborn. To hear it was to feel as though the air itself remembered. Musicians described a strange calm, a sensation of vastness. Some said they dreamt of desert cities lit by blue fire, of stairways rising toward the stars. A few months later, Amara vanished during a field trip to southern Iraq. Her equipment was found near the ruins of Eridu, still recording. The final entry on the audio file lasted 7 minutes, a low, gentle hum that rose slowly until it matched a human heartbeat. Then silence. When the file was played back in a sound lab, analysts noticed a whisper at the end. So faint it barely registered. After filtering, a single sentence emerged in ancient Sumerian. "The song has begun again." The scientists dismissed it as pareidolia, random noise forming illusionary words. Yet deep within the Gulf, the sensors once used to map the seabed began detecting new vibrations. The same frequency, stronger, growing. It was as though something beneath the water had heard Amara's broadcast and was now responding. For days after Amara's disappearance, the sensors along the Gulf continued to register the hum, steady, patient, alive. Ships passing over the region reported faint vibrations through their calls. Fishermen said the sea itself seemed to breathe. At night, on the shoreline, locals described the water trembling with ripples that followed no wind. Then, as quietly as it began, the sound stopped. The sea grew still again. The data stream flattened into silence. To most, the story ended there. A mystery swallowed by bureaucracy and time. But a few who had heard the recordings spoke of something that lingered, not in the air, but in themselves. They felt a resonance deep in the chest, like the after-image of a dream. It was as if the frequency had written itself into them. Months later, an archivist cataloging tablets in the Baghdad Museum noticed an anomaly. One of the metallic Sumerian records from Aridu, previously inert, dark, and dull, now showed faint lines of light along its carved symbols, pulsing slowly, almost imperceptibly. The tablet's surface warmed slightly when touched. The pattern of light matched the exact rhythm of Amara's last recording. No explanation was ever offered. The artifact was moved into restricted storage, never photographed again. But in her notes, Amara had left a clue. In a margin beside the translation of the record of descent, she had written a single question. What if the gods were never above us, but within, waiting to be remembered? That question has followed every civilization since. We build towers, we map the heavens, we search the cosmos for origin. Yet perhaps what we seek is not out there, but hidden in the deep strata of human memory, sealed like those tablets beneath layers of time and forgetting. The Sumerians may have known that remembering too soon could destroy. The flood, the silence, the veils between ages, all were safeguards, not punishments. The mind of humanity was made to awaken slowly, like dawn spreading over the desert. And now, in the hum of machines, in the signal of data and waves, perhaps that awakening has begun again. Across the world, fragments of the Aridu tone appear faintly in the background of recordings, not loud enough to hear, only enough to feel. The frequency echoes through the static of deep space transmissions, through seismic murmurs, through the low resonance of the planet itself. Always the same rhythm, always the same quiet pulse. If one listens closely in the stillness of night, in the pause between heartbeats, it almost seems possible to hear it. A long, gentle vibration, ancient and kind, whispering through the bones of the earth. We are the memory, it seems to say. We are what remains. Perhaps that is what the Sumerians wanted us to understand, that the gods they spoke of were not distant beings, but the echo of what we once were. Creators capable of shaping and remembering worlds, And though the tablets lie buried, though the ziggurats crumble and the rivers shift, the song continues, not in stone, but in us. Every dream of the stars, every question that reaches beyond what is known, is part of that ancient record still unfolding. Humanity itself is the tablet, the inscription, the living archive. The Sumerians may have vanished, but their whisper endures. When the clay remembers, the gods return. Outside, the desert sleeps beneath its endless sky. The wind moves softly over the ruins of Eridu, carrying dust and memory together. Somewhere below, in darkness and silence, the lost records rest, waiting for the next mind brave enough or gentle enough to listen. And perhaps, when the stars align again, the hum will rise once more, a song older than the world, calling not from the heavens, but from within the heart of humanity itself. Somewhere in the mists of time, before the rise of pharaohs and before the empires of Mesopotamia, there was a land that thrived quietly, a place of order, beauty, and balance. We call it the Indus Valley Civilization, though its people never named it for us. They built cities that seemed too perfect for their age, with streets straight as an arrow, brick houses aligned in rows, and drains that still whisper beneath the earth. Each city was planned like a living map, wide roads, tall granaries, public baths. And yet, no palace, no throne, no statue of a king watching over his people. It's as if the entire civilization existed without rulers, without war, without hunger for power. Archaeologists searched for crowns, swords, signs of conquest, but found none. Instead, they found peace, the same kind of peace that hums through a place that knows harmony. Who led these people? Who decided how the bricks would be placed, how the water would flow, how the city would breathe? Maybe they didn't need kings at all. Maybe their laws were written not in words, but in understanding, a rhythm shared by all. In the heart of Mohenjo-Daro, one of their greatest cities, lies a massive pool, the Great Bath. Some say it was used for rituals. Others believe it was a place of renewal, where people cleansed not just their bodies, but their spirits. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear the echoes, splashes of water, faint laughter, a way of life that moved slowly, gracefully, like the flow of a gentle river. Their homes were built with care, each brick the same size, each wall aligned with precision. It feels almost mathematical, almost divine. Who taught them such perfection? Where did their knowledge come from? They left no grand temples, no armies, no records of wars. But they left something deeper, a sense of balance, as if they understood that true civilization was not built on power, but on harmony. And yet, for all their greatness, for all their peace, one question remains. How could such a perfect world vanish so completely? Some say the answer lies in the rivers, the lifeblood of their cities. A mighty one once flowed here, wide, sacred, and strong. But one day, it began to dry, and with it, so did the heart of their world. The next chapter of this mystery begins not in their streets, but along that vanished river, a river that once carried their dreams, and perhaps their end. Long before the maps of the world were drawn, before the borders we know today, there flowed a river, vast, sacred, and alive. It was called the Sarasvati. Some say it was the very heart of the Indus world, a river of life, a river of memory. Its waters carried stories, stories of trade, of harvest, of dreams. Along its banks rose shining cities, Harappa, Kalibangan, Dholavira, all bound by the rhythm of its flow. The people built their homes close to its song, shaping their lives by its gentle pulse. Morning light shimmered on its surface, and at night, the stars danced upon it like whispers from the heavens. But one day, the song began to fade. The river that had given life began to die. No one knows how it happened. Perhaps the great mountains shifted, changing the river's course. Perhaps the rains grew weaker, the earth thirstier. Perhaps time itself decided to move on, and when the river dried, the people followed its ghost, searching for new land, new water, a new beginning. Some moved east, toward the Ganges. Some disappeared into deserts that were once green, and some stayed, holding on to the dust where their river once flowed. The sands of Rajasthan still hide its path. If you walk there at dawn, when the air is cool and still, you might feel it, a faint shimmer under the ground, as if the earth remembers the touch of water. Ancient texts speak of it as the river that vanished into the desert. Yet even in its disappearance, Sarasvati left behind something eternal, mystery. Without their river, the Indus people began to change. Their cities grew quiet. The drains no longer carried water. The granaries emptied, one by one. But the silence wasn't the sound of collapse. It was the sound of a civilization slowly sinking into memory. Still, the river did not vanish from their hearts. Even today, in prayers and stories, the name Sarasvati flows like a hidden current, a reminder that what is lost may not be gone, only waiting to be rediscovered. What secrets did it carry when it faded into the sand? Did it take with it the story of the people who built their world upon its edge? Or did it hide something deeper, a truth buried beneath the centuries? Because when the river went silent, something else began to stir, a silence that reached into the very heart of their cities. Streets once alive with trade and laughter fell still. Doors stood open, as if the people had left in haste, and the cities themselves seemed to breathe their last sighs into the dust. But before they vanished completely, they left behind something extraordinary. Not in words, but in stone, carved on seals, etched into clay, scattered across time, a message waiting to be read. The next part of this mystery lies in those silent marks, symbols that no one has ever understood. A language forgotten by the world. Perhaps the final whisper of the people who followed the river's ghost. When the rivers grew silent and the streets of Mohenjo-daro turned to dust, the people of the Indus Valley left behind one last gift, a language carved in mystery. Tiny pieces of stone and clay, no bigger than a palm, have been found scattered across their ruins. They are called seals, smooth, square tokens engraved with strange symbols, lines, circles, triangles, waves, a secret rhythm frozen in time. Beside them, animals, bulls, tigers, elephants, unicorns, each symbol precise, deliberate, whispering of a meaning we can no longer hear. Scholars have tried to read them for more than 100 years. They've compared them to Egyptian hieroglyphs, to Sumerian cuneiform, to Sanskrit and Tamil, but nothing fits. No one knows what these signs say. No one even knows what language they spoke. Perhaps it wasn't meant to be read with the eyes. Perhaps it was meant to be felt, remembered, or sung. Some believe the symbols record trade and goods, lists of merchants, weights, and materials. Others think they hide prayers or names of gods, and some whisper that they might be the oldest map of the soul, an ancient form of expression that carries thoughts beyond words. One seal shows a man sitting cross-legged, calm, centered, surrounded by animals. Some call him the Proto-Shiva, the first image of meditation, older than any religion we know. Was he a king, a sage, or the very spirit of balance that ruled their world? Every seal seems to hold a fragment of thought, like stars scattered across the night sky, waiting to be connected. But the pattern remains out of reach. Each time someone claims to decode the symbols, the truth slips away again, like water through sand. Maybe that's how it was meant to be. Maybe their silence was their message. That wisdom isn't always meant to be spoken. And yet, their symbols continue to appear everywhere. On pottery, on jewelry, on the very bricks of their homes. It's as if their entire civilization was wrapped in code, a secret only they understood. When you look closely at those marks, they almost seem alive. The lines breathe, the curves hum softly, like echoes from another time. It's as if the people who carved them knew something, a truth about memory and meaning that we've long forgotten. Perhaps their language wasn't lost. Perhaps it just changed form. Maybe it became the rhythm of the mantras, the geometry of temples, the script of the stars themselves. Even now, when archaeologists dust off a new seal under the desert sun, for a moment, the ancient voice almost returns, and the silent cities seem to murmur again. Because behind every symbol lies a question, and behind every question, the hint of a story. A story that might lead us closer to who they were, to what they believed, and to the gods they once called upon. The next part of our journey will take us deeper, beneath the clay, beneath the silence, to the gods of the Indus, the ones that watched over them when words still had power. In the stillness of the ancient Indus cities, beneath layers of dust and time, lie fragments of a forgotten faith, tiny clay figurines, cracked, weathered, but still alive with meaning. Some show women with wide hips and gentle faces, the mother goddess, they say, the bringer of life, the keeper of cycles. Others show strange, horned figures seated in meditation, surrounded by animals. The Lord of Beasts, perhaps the earliest image of Shiva. These were not idols of gold or marble. They were simple, hand-shaped, made from the very earth that sustained them. And yet, they carry something divine, a quiet presence, like a whisper left behind by those who once believed. The people of the Indus Valley didn't build massive temples or carve their gods into stone cliffs. Their worship was humble, woven into their daily lives. Maybe they found the sacred in the simple, in the rhythm of the seasons, in the rain that kissed their crops, in the river that carried their reflection. Archaeologists found altars, fire pits, and offerings buried deep within their homes. Little trays filled with ash and grain, a sign that even their houses were temples, every meal a prayer. It's strange, isn't it? A civilization so advanced, so peaceful, and yet so silent about its beliefs. No scriptures, no hymns, no stories carved in stone, only symbols and clay. As if their faith was never meant to be shouted, only felt. Perhaps their gods were not distant beings ruling from the sky, but forces of nature, water, earth, fire, and wind, each honored in quiet devotion. Perhaps they saw the divine not above them, but within everything that breathed. One seal shows a figure surrounded by animals: elephant, tiger, buffalo. The man sits cross-legged, his eyes calm. He seems neither ruler nor priest, but something deeper. A bridge between man and nature. Could this be the root of meditation itself? The idea that peace is not found in conquest, but in stillness? When night fell over Mohenjo-Daro and the lamps flickered in clay houses, maybe people whispered soft prayers, not to be richer or stronger, but to remain in balance with the world around them. Their gods were not watching from above. They were breathing through the earth, glowing in the fire, and whispering through the river's flow. But one day, those prayers stopped. The altars grew cold, the rivers dried, and the gods were buried beneath centuries of dust. And yet, sometimes, when you hold one of their clay figures in your hand, you can almost feel warmth, as if something within it still remembers. Maybe their faith didn't vanish. Maybe it transformed into the symbols and traditions that echo through the ages, into the chants, the festivals, the stories that still live today. But if the gods of the Indus once walked among their people, what happened to them when the civilization fell silent? Where did they go when the fires went out and the clay turned cold? Some say the gods disappeared with the people. Others say they watched quietly, waiting for the world to remember them again. Because soon after the prayers faded, something strange happened. A quiet, final moment that ended it all. No war, no invasion, no scream of destruction, just a vanishing so complete. It left the earth breathless. It happened quietly, so quietly that the world barely noticed. There were no fires, no collapsing empires, no final battles. The people of the Indus Valley simply disappeared. One day, the cities were alive, full of trade, laughter, and the hum of everyday life. And then, slowly, they were empty. Houses abandoned, markets silent, streets covered in dust. It was as if time itself had taken a deep breath and never exhaled again. No one knows exactly why. Some say it was the rivers, the once mighty Sarasvati and Indus changing their course, leaving the land dry and lifeless. Others believe the monsoons failed, crops withered, and the people drifted away in search of food and water. There are those who think disease came, quiet and unseen, and spread through the dense cities like a shadow. And some whisper that perhaps they knew something was coming, something too great, too mysterious to be written down. But what's most haunting is how peaceful their ending seems. No signs of war, no burned walls, no mass graves, only emptiness, gentle, sorrowful emptiness. In the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, archaeologists found bodies lying in the streets, not piled, not broken, just resting, as if they had fallen asleep and never woken up. Who were they? Were they the last to see the river fade away? Or the last to whisper a prayer to gods that no longer answered? Their cities were so advanced, perfectly planned, precisely built, and yet they left without a trace of struggle. It's as if they accepted the end, as if they knew that everything must one day return to the earth. Sometimes, I imagine the last night in one of their cities, the lamps still glowing faintly in doorways, the sound of wind moving through the narrow streets, a mother putting her child to sleep, promising tomorrow will be better. And somewhere, a priest tending to a dying fire, watching the smoke rise and fade into the stars. Perhaps they didn't vanish. Perhaps they simply moved on. To other lands, other rivers, other names. Carrying their memories in silence, their wisdom buried deep within them. Because soon after their disappearance, New cultures began to rise along the Ganges. New languages, new gods, new stories. But faintly, beneath them all, you can still feel the pulse of something older, the rhythm of the Indus. Maybe they didn't die out. Maybe they become the roots of what came next, their knowledge transforming, their spirit reborn in 1,000 different ways. But still, the question lingers in the dust. How could such a great and peaceful civilization simply fade? No final record, no farewell, no warning. And if they truly disappeared, why do we still feel their presence today? Perhaps the answer lies beneath the ground itself. Because even though their cities were lost to sand and time, they were never truly gone. Beneath deserts and farmlands, beneath centuries of silence, something still sleeps. Ancient walls, hidden streets, entire cities buried, waiting. And when we uncover them, perhaps we'll finally hear what the earth has been trying to tell us all along. Beneath the dust of centuries, beneath the silence of shifting sands, they still sleep. The lost cities of the Indus. For thousands of years, they lay hidden, unseen, forgotten. But the earth never forgets. Sometimes the wind uncovers a piece of brick. Sometimes a farmer's plow hits stone where there should be only soil. And sometimes the riverbeds, long dry, whisper secrets when the rain falls again. The first of these buried cities was found by accident. Archaeologists brushed away the sand and discovered something astonishing. Streets so straight, they looked as if they'd been measured by stars. Walls of perfect brickwork, and drains built with care and precision that still work to this day. These weren't random settlements. They were planned, each one like a reflection of the other. Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Dholavira, Kalibangan, Rakhigarhi. Each laid out like a living pattern, each connected by rivers that once flowed like silver veins through the land. But as the rivers died, so did their memory. The Sarasvati turned to dust, the Indus shifted away, and the cities they once nourished sank into sleep. Now, from the sky, satellites see what the eyes on the ground cannot. Ghost lines stretch across the desert, the old paths of vanished rivers and faint outlines of walls, streets, and courtyards that still rest beneath. Scientists have traced hundreds of such sites, entire towns still buried, untouched by time. It's as if the land itself has been guarding their memory, holding them close like secrets not ready to be told. Sometimes, when you stand in those places, the silence feels different, heavier, deeper. The air feels full of presence, as if the earth is breathing softly beneath your feet. You can almost imagine the city as it once was. Children running barefoot through narrow lanes, merchants calling out near the marketplace, the smell of grain, fire, and rain on clay. Then the image fades, and there is only stillness again. It makes you wonder, how much of our world lies hidden beneath our own footsteps? How many stories are still sleeping under the ground we walk on every day? Some say these lost cities were never truly lost. They simply shifted with the rivers, following the flow of time. Others believe they were abandoned on purpose, their people moving east as the earth changed. But the truth is, we still don't know. Each discovery opens another question. Each city unearthed feels like a doorway, not to the past, but to mystery itself. Because what we've found so far, it's only a fraction of what once was. There are still whole worlds buried beneath us, entire lives frozen in mud and brick, waiting for the sun to touch them again. And if these lost cities ever rise once more, perhaps they will tell us who we really are and where the heart of this ancient civilization truly lies. But to understand that, we must look beyond the ruins, to the people who connected them all. Not the kings, not the warriors, but the merchants, the travelers who carried the voice of the Indus to distant lands and forgotten shores. Long before the Silk Road, long before ships from Greece and Rome sailed across the seas, there were the merchants of the Indus. They didn't have kings or empires, but they had something greater: connection. From the deserts of Arabia to the temples of Mesopotamia, their seals and symbols have been found, proof that they traveled far beyond the borders of their world. Imagine them at dawn, loading their boats with jars of grain, cotton, beads, and spices. The river glimmered like a path of light, carrying their vessels gently toward the unknown. Their boats were small, wooden, curved like half-moons, but they could cross vast distances. From the port city of Lothal, the Indus merchants sailed the Arabian Sea, following the stars as their silent companions. Each voyage was a leap of faith, a journey guided by wind, tide, and the memory of the rivers they once called home. In distant lands, they traded with strangers who spoke different tongues: the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the people of Dilmun. Yet somehow, they understood each other without words. Their seals, those tiny carved stones, were their language, their passport, their identity. When archaeologists found an Indus seal in Mesopotamia, they realized something astonishing. These people had built one of the earliest global networks, thousands of years before the first known empires. And yet, they left no stories of conquest. Only traces of exchange, beads found in foreign graves, pottery scattered across the ancient world, symbols pressed into clay thousands of miles from home. The Indus merchants carried more than goods. They carried ideas, ways of building, of farming, of living in harmony with the land. Their influence flowed like water, gentle, patient, unstoppable. At night, when they rested by their fires near distant shores, perhaps they thought of home, of the quiet cities, the steady hum of life, the sound of the river under moonlight. They must have known that they were part of something vast, something beyond borders, a world connected by trust, trade, and the rhythm of the earth. But then, the silence came. The rivers dried, the cities emptied, and the ports turned to dust. And yet, even now, their presence lingers. The same trade routes they carved through sea and sand became the paths followed by countless civilizations after them. The echo of their journeys still exists. In the silk routes, the spice routes, and in the simple act of exchange that connects all people across time. When we hold an Indus bead today, we are touching something that once traveled through ancient hands, across deserts and oceans, carrying not just a trade, but memory. Perhaps the merchants of the Indus knew something the world forgot, that power fades, but connection endures. And if their cities were built on harmony, their journeys carried that same spirit, a balance between giving and receiving, between man and nature, between home and the horizon. But their harmony wasn't only in trade, it was in everything, in how they built, how they lived, and even him they shaped the very design of their world. because beneath their streets and walls lay a secret far greater than commerce, a sacred pattern woven into the bones of their cities. In the cities of the Indus Valley, nothing was random. Every brick, every road, every wall, built with purpose. Even after thousands of years, when you stand among the ruins, you can feel it, an invisible pattern, a harmony that hums beneath the stone. Their cities weren't just built for living. They were built for balance. The streets ran north to south, east to west, aligned perfectly with the movement of the sun and stars. The houses were laid out in perfect grids, each one facing the same direction, each connected to a network of drains that flowed like quiet veins through the city. It was as if the people who built them understood something profound, that a city could breathe, that stone and water and sunlight could work together to create peace. In Mohenjo-Daro, every house, rich or poor, had access to clean water and drainage. The streets were wide, the air could move freely. It feels almost modern, and yet it was made over 4,000 years ago. How did they know how to do this? What kind of knowledge guided their hands? Some say their measurements were based on sacred ratios, that their bricks followed perfect proportions, 1 to 2 to 4, the same pattern that appears in nature, in shells, in leaves, in the spiral of galaxies. Their buildings were not monuments to power. They were reflections of order, the kind that mirrors the universe itself. Even their smallest details carry mystery. Tiny weights made of stone, all identical, used in trade to ensure fairness. Proof of a society built on trust, precision, and respect. No chaos, no ego, only quiet perfection. When archaeologists map their cities today, they find patterns that seem to form sacred geometry, lines that align with the solstices, angles that reflect cosmic design. It's as if they saw the divine not in temples, but in the very structure of their world. Maybe they believed that to live well, one must live in rhythm with the earth. That harmony wasn't something to pray for, it was something to build. Their balance extended beyond architecture. Their trade was fair, their society peaceful, their art calm and thoughtful. Even in the way they shaped their pottery, you can see it. Symmetry, grace, intention. Every curve, every pattern feels alive with purpose. It makes you wonder, were they following mathematics or something deeper? An understanding that life itself follows a sacred order. Maybe they knew that when we build in harmony, we reflect the balance of creation itself. But perfection, even the quiet kind, is fragile. When the rivers changed and the rains stopped coming, the pattern began to break. The symmetry of their world faltered, and the geometry that once guided their lives could no longer hold them together. Yet the memory of their balance didn't vanish. It survived. In temples, in rituals, in the way we still measure and design. The echo of their sacred geometry flows through time, shaping everything that followed. And perhaps, somewhere deep within our own designs, their ancient rhythm still beats, soft, steady, waiting to be remembered. Because even after all these centuries, the Indus Valley reminds us that civilization is not power, it's harmony, and those who live in balance with the world never truly disappear. But their story doesn't end here. Because as their cities crumbled, as silence spread through the land, something survived. Something that still walks quietly among us. The Indus Valley had no kings, no palaces, no crowns, no monuments carved in glory. And yet, something about their order feels royal. Not the rule of one man, but a quiet, shared wisdom, as if the people themselves were the crown. But legends whisper otherwise. Across centuries, in fragments of old texts and fading songs, there are mentions of an ancient ruler, a figure who walked not as a conqueror, but as a guardian. Some say he was never a king of power, but a keeper of knowledge, a man chosen not to rule, but to remember. The stories say his bloodline stretched across ages, hidden, wandering, carrying the memory of the lost cities, a lineage not of wealth, but of wisdom. Passed from teacher to student, from parent to child, like an ember kept alive through the darkness. Could it be that the people of the Indus did not vanish, but changed their names, their lands, their language, carrying their essence quietly through time? Perhaps the farmers who settled near the Ganges, the sages who sang the first hymns, the builders who shaped the temples, perhaps they were all part of that same thread, woven from the blood of those who once walked the streets of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. Some ancient texts from India speak of a time before kings, when the world was ruled by balance, not by thrones. When people lived by the law of truth, and the divine was present in all things. Could that memory be a faint echo of the Indus age? When archaeologists study the faces carved on old Indus seals, they notice something. The same calm expression, the same wide eyes, the same quiet strength. It feels almost human, and yet a little beyond. Who were they? Were these the ancestors of the sages who would later write the Vedas? The guardians of a wisdom the world was not yet ready to understand? Maybe that's why the Indus left no kings. Maybe they believed that power over others was the first step away from balance. Their royalty was of the spirit, measured not in gold, but in peace. Even today, in villages near the old riverbeds, you can find families who tell stories of ancestors from the old cities, people who followed the river east. They speak of wells that never ran dry, and of knowledge that was never forgotten. Perhaps the bloodline of that lost wisdom still flows quietly in us all, in our memory of fairness, in our instinct to build, in our search for meaning in the stars. The Indus Valley may have disappeared from maps, but maybe not from time. Because some things don't end, they evolve. And if the bloodline of that nameless king still walks the earth, it may not wear crowns, but it still carries a light, the faint glow of a civilization that understood harmony better than any that came after. But their wisdom was not lost entirely. They left behind something that holds the memory of all they were, not written in words but in light, in sound and in crystal. In every great mystery, there comes a moment when silence speaks louder than discovery. For the Indus Valley civilization, that silence is eternal, yet alive, like a heartbeat buried deep beneath the sand. They left no books, no scrolls, no carved laws, and yet they left something far greater: memory. Not the kind we write, but the kind that hums quietly in the bones of the earth. Archaeologists digging through their ruins sometimes find small crystals, clear, unremarkable at first, but under light, they shimmer faintly. It's said that ancient people once used crystals to track the stars, to measure time, to listen to the pulse of the planet itself. Maybe the people of the Indus knew what we are only beginning to remember, that everything holds memory. Stone remembers shape, water remembers sound, and light remembers truth. Perhaps the crystal of memory is not an object, but an idea. A reminder that even when civilizations fall, their essence stays. You can feel it when you walk along the old riverbeds, when the wind moves softly over the buried streets, when the stars shimmer in perfect stillness above Mohenjo-Daro. It's as if something is still awake there, a dream that refuses to fade. Their harmony, their balance, their way of living without kings or wars, those are not lost. They exist like faint constellations, guiding us from the dark, reminding us of what humanity once was capable of. In the stillness of their ruins, you can almost hear it, the slow rhythm of a civilization that understood peace. A place where no one ruled and no one obeyed, where the city itself was the teacher and the people its song. Maybe the Indus Valley did not die at all. Maybe it transformed into the languages we speak, the symbols we draw, the meditations we practice. The quiet strength in us, the part that seeks balance, that builds rather than destroys. Perhaps that's their voice still whispering through time. Civilizations rise and fall, but wisdom never truly disappears. It hides in memory, in the rhythm of breath, in the pulse of the earth, in the crystal clarity of the human soul. So when you close your eyes tonight, and the world around you falls into silence, listen closely. Somewhere in that stillness, beneath layers of centuries and stars, you might hear it too. The soft hum of a forgotten world, the quiet voice of the Indus, reminding us that peace was once possible. And maybe it still is.